cried the sparrow.
You're listening to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast, where we sit down with everyday people who do extraordinary things. I'm your host, Jerome Rand. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to the show, coming to you from Northern Michigan now, the traveling man, all over the place. And it has been wild. We've been I don't know, it's too much fun. I got a whole bunch of family up here right now, and it's crazy, and there's little kids and bubble-making machines and dogs, and, sometimes it can be a little bit overwhelming, but at the same time, these are also those perfect moments that you want to make sure you're cherishing and trying to utilize as best as possible. So that whole idea of I'll sleep when I'm dead, I think that's going to go a long way this week. But today, I actually am putting up a podcast that we did a couple of weeks ago, and this was with Chelle, who has her own podcast called Passages from the Heart. She bought a compact 25, and it was kind of a big step up. She's always trying to take the next iteration and go further and forward with the sailing and everything. And she and I have been working together for quite a while. But this was going to be the first time where I actually go to the boat and we get out on the water and gain some essential experience and also just get to know a new boat. You know, it can be a little overwhelming if you're going from a boat that, typically has maybe a little outboard engine or is in the 16, 18 foot region. And then you hop up to an inboard diesel, fuel systems, water systems, all the sort of things that can be a little intimidating. And I know when I got Sparrow, I was a little bit like, holy cow, look at all this stuff. And so basically, that was my call to action, was to come up there and get them through all that. And her and Ben, it was an absolutely fabulous time. First time I got to sail on Lake Superior, so thank you very much for that. I'll put links in the description, obviously, for all the stuff to help support this show, but also for where you can find more information on what Chelle has been putting out. So without further ado, I'm just going to get right into it. Hopefully everybody has a safe and fun 4th of July. Get out there, enjoy it. What an amazing, amazing place we live in. And it's a great time to look around and just give thanks. And also try and have some fun with all the lovely Americans all around you. It's a great place. I've been traveling all over this country, and I'm still just astounded by not only the beauty, but also the wonderful people that I meet day in and day out from the East Coast to the West Coast to the South to the North. It really is something. All right, enough of that. Here is my conversation with Chelle and Ben from Lake Superior. Thanks for listening. Chelle and Ben, how we doing? Welcome to the show. I guess since we're doing this as a double, I'll say welcome to the Sailing into Oblivion podcast. And Chelle, you can say,
welcome to the Passages from the Heart podcast.
Yes. Very nice. Woo! Very nice. Well, absolutely great to see you guys again after our lovely trip up to the UP, Lake Superior. That I have to admit was the first time I've ever sailed on those waters.
Yeah. I wish we could have gotten out more onto the main lake so that you could experience conditions there too, but we'll save that for the next time.
Yeah. Well, and the Apostle Islands, I mean, even though we could only see them off in the distance, they definitely look very appealing, especially on a chart. I mean, it looks like a playground for day sailing, overnight, weekend trips, a really, really neat spot. I mean, that must have come into play when you were trying to figure out where to buy the boat and, where you wanted to actually have your sort of sailing grounds.
Yeah, I mean, I'll just jump in. I wanted to, first of all, when we were shopping for a larger boat, it made the most sense to look in that region of the Great Lakes just because of proximity to where we are. And then also I have a bit of a history, specifically more with Lake Superior, but a little bit with Lake Michigan too. But I guess the real impressionable part of me as a youth, we used to go 1 week a summer. My dad would charter a sailboat out of Port Superior, Superior Yacht Charters or something near Bayfield, Wisconsin, in the Apostle Islands area. And that just sort of really stuck with me throughout my life. And it's something that I wanted to share with Ben, because he grew up on the ocean, not sailing, but boating. And like I said, just kind of all came together, and we thought we might be more in the Bayfield area. But as we came to learn more about the services that some of those marinas in that vicinity offered, it turned out actually where the boat was, this Compact 25, it was at Washburn Marina, which is really a super friendly, well known for its A to Z sort of services that it provides for whether you're a sailor or powerboat or whatever. And so it just seemed to make the most sense. So if we did have a problem, we would know that we would have access to professional help. That gave me a lot more confidence. So, so it ended up working out pretty well to be where we are.
Well, yeah, and it is. Sorry, go ahead, Ben.
Oh, I was just going to say, I like the Apostle Islands because there's lots of places to go to. Like you were saying, you can just overnight. It's also gives you some protected waterways if you aren't interested in venturing out onto the larger part of this Lake Superior. So it can be a place where you can just hang out and sail, and it's great sailing and lots of places to go. Or you can venture out on Lake Superior and go across multiple Great Lakes if you want.
Yeah.
Yeah, you kind of have your choice. I mean, and that bay was such a great spot. I mean, you know, that last day that we're sailing, the winds are blowing 18, 20 knots out of the northeast. And, you know, if we didn't have that big protection of Long Island, which basically kind of cuts the chop out of that bay, I mean, it would have been really rough in there. It would have been probably like, I don't know if we can actually go out, but we were able to sail all around that area.
Yeah, that was really cool. And I didn't really have a good sense of, like, starting out in that area. I felt, you know, by car, of course, to get up further north to where closer to the Apostles, like Madeline Island and Basswood and the town of Bayfield itself, you know, it seems you just hop in the car and you're there in 10 minutes. But it was interesting because it gave me this total appreciation for, you know, like destination sailing, which I've really never done that except as a young person when I was with my family and we chartered, because, you know, then it was like, okay, we're leaving from Bayfield and we're sailing to Isle Royale, you know, or we're sailing to Raspberry Island or Stockton Island or wherever. But, you know, where we sail currently before this boat and is just day sailing type of stuff. So even though we didn't necessarily with you even go like to a specific place and, you know, anchor out or, you know, tie off the dock lines up at Bayfield or wherever, it did give me a real appreciation for, you know, we're not just talking about a straight line from A to Z. We have to be really mindful of, like you were saying, the contours of the bottom of the lake in the area or the bay where we were, because, you know, maybe it's a little too shallow there. And so, in fact, that did kind of freak me out a little bit because the channel was really close to the shoreline, it seemed like, when we were sailing towards Long Island. And I really was relying on you to, like, give me that confidence of, like, it's okay, we're not going to hit anything. Because it is, you know, it's a little intimidating, right? When you've never really done it and there's hidden obstacles underneath us. And there's a whole new level of appreciation for, like I said, for destination sailing, so that when we do decide, okay, now we're ready to actually go further, you know, I have a greater sense of, you know, how fast we can get there with varying wind conditions, because we got to see a lot of that with our boat with you know, how fast you could go in lighter winds, with the sail trimming that we could do to adjust our speed, or, you know, that it was just, there's so much, really.
Yeah. Well, and I mean, that was where really trying to trying to connect the dots between what you're seeing on the charts or the navigation, that little Garmin that we were using, and Navionics, I guess. I mean, we had a bunch of different forms of seeing where we were, but it's really trying to connect the dots into what we're seeing in the real world. And that usually comes with time. You know, the more day sailing and stuff that you guys do in that bay will really up the comfort level, where, you know, the idea of going across, Ben, what was the name of the town straight across from Washburn?
Ashland.
Ashland. Yeah.
Yeah, Ashland. Yeah, that was at the bottom of the bay, across and at the bottom. Yeah,
right. And
where
we almost by the lighthouse. Yeah,
I remember it for the gigantic margarita on the last night, for sure.
That
was a great dinner. Shout
Yeah.
out to that Mexican restaurant. That was fantastic. And it was the fastest service I think I've ever had in my life.
Yeah. I can't remember the name of it, but yeah, it was real. I think El Taqueria or something, but yeah, it was
something
really good.
Like that. But yeah, I mean, as you kind of explore those areas and you get more and more accustomed to them, then all of a sudden you kind of start to realize, oh, okay, so there's that one area we got to look for over here, but we're all good.
Yeah.
You know, Ben, you kept talking about, you know, we're good all the way down to the bottom of this bay. And, you know, it's kind of testing those boundaries and getting out there without touching the bottom, obviously. But that, I think, will make the experience up there a whole lot more fun going forward, because you'll feel like, you know, you don't have this kind of hemmed in little area. You've got the entire bay for when it's a little too rough to go to the islands. But then, you know, when it is perfect, you can just scoot right out there and you can go closer to the cliffs and you can get those visuals and all that.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll all come with time.
Yeah, I think, you know, looking forward to the next time we go up, I think I have definitely a lot more confidence about where we can go safely. And I think, like what you were saying about the Navionics, I think that will probably be, I think, for us, maybe the more go-to sort of tool, because that Garmin, as nice as it is to have it, it's after the tiller. And so, like you were kind of saying, it's a little wonky having to look behind you to see what's going on there. I mean, if someone's at the helm, then the other person can check it out. But for a single-hander, which actually the guy we bought the boat from, he was a single-hander. So I don't know how he dealt with it, I guess, somehow. Or maybe he did have an iPad or something to do Navionics. I don't know. But yeah,
I'm not sure. I've never seen a screen mounted, you know, right behind the tiller on a boat like that. I mean, it was very difficult to really, because, you know, not only are you having to look backwards and down, so you can't keep your eyes anywhere close to forward where you should be looking. It kind of discombobulated you a little bit, because you look and you're looking backwards and the screen is facing aft, but you're going forward and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, definitely might want to rethink that one. And I think you're on the right path with like Navionics on an iPad. Those are so easy to mount, and you don't need to have those big arms and all those things that, you know, are sometimes helpful, like to hold a navigation screen, but then, you know, they're not all that aesthetically pleasing down below and all that sort of stuff.
Right. Yeah, for sure.
But that's all, you know, in the future, all the custom modifications and stuff. I really have to say, though, the sales were amazing. That was so nice to have that brand new set and to be there when we broke them in.
Yeah, I have to say, like, that feeling, at least for me, I don't know about for Ben, but that feeling of just, it felt, I don't want to use the word effortless to find this spot, you know, and again, we weren't destination sailing totally. That last day was when we had more wind to really fill the sails, but it was more like we could, you know, just kind of sail with where the wind was coming from, and really just, I don't know how to describe the feeling. It was just everything felt super,
freedom. It was all free. You could do whatever you wanted.
and just super balanced. I didn't really perceive any weather helm or just everything just felt like just this you keep coming to this words, the sweet spot kind of sort of thing. But I just feel like I've been chasing that feeling ever since we left. I can't wait to get back to that place because it's a pretty magical place to be. It really is.
Yeah, I think with the new sails, I mean, some of the sailing we've done up there last year when we were on different other people's boats and I don't know, the new sails, they just seem to power the boat so smoothly. Like they just really, it was really great.
Yeah.
I mean, sailing is wonderful no matter what, but to have those new sails.
When you got those new sails, it makes a difference, right?
Boat up. Yeah. Yeah, it was different.
And the fact that all the telltales are there, and so you can really trim the sails well, and they're just that they were. I mean, I'm with you, Ben. Those things were powering that boat really, really efficiently, and it was nice for our purposes as well because we could then, reef down the mainsail and roll in some of the jib and see how that affected things. And I'm glad we were able to do a lot of different dynamic sailing and kind of messing with that. And I think the new sails really helped with that because you can visualize all the things. When you have a big blown out mainsail, it's kind of hard to mess with all the outhaul and all this sort of stuff in a really efficient manner. But those new sails, I mean, you could see it plain as day, putting more curve in and more twist or less twist.
Yeah.
It was really helpful. And it was nice because we had different wind conditions all those 3 days, from light winds to, the last day when it was blowing pretty good. To try out the new sails.
And next time we'll definitely need to make sure we have the spinnaker so we can mess around with that. Add a little extra challenge to the whole thing.
It's funny that you mentioned that because yesterday I actually I have a closet down in our basement where I store some of our gear, and I came across the spinnaker and I forgot. Oh yeah, I didn't bring that up. but like we probably wouldn't have gotten to it anyway. But yeah, no, that's something I definitely want to learn how to fly that because I think it's an asymmetrical. I don't think it's a symmetrical, but I'd have to take it out and re-examine it. But yeah, that's a whole nother level or animal, if you will, of sailing that. We haven't done that on our smaller boats either. We haven't flown any spinnakers. And some people, they make it sound pretty easy peasy, but my guess is they've done it quite a few times and have the system kind of down pat sort of thing. But yeah, that's definitely something that we'll have to work on.
Well, most of the sailing, we do.
Sorry,
I mean, we're not necessarily going to a specific destination. We can sail on whatever point of sail that we want or is comfortable, or whether it's on the inland lake or on Lake Superior. But we definitely need to get skilled with using the spinnaker.
Yeah, for sure.
It'll really come in handy, I think, up there, because it did seem like you will sort of have those light wind conditions quite often. And when you have light wind and you've got that really flat lake out there, that's where it really comes into its own, because you can still move around even though it's only blowing 5-6 knots and you're not thinking, oh geez, like we should just turn the motor on. And I would think if it is an asymmetrical spinnaker, that's going to help, because those essentially run just like a big jib. And so a lot of the same trimming and all that sort of stuff kind of apply. It's not quite such a leap as it would be if it was a traditional spinnaker with the spinnaker pole and all that. Right.
And it wouldn't be the same as a drifter either, because drifters are attached to the stay, where isn't it asymmetrical? It's not attached to the stay, right?
Right. So it has a free floating luff of the sail. And usually you would attach it with a little tiny tack line, and that way you can change the shape as well. But I don't want to get ahead of ourselves on that. But yeah, it's it's definitely one of those things that adds a different dynamic and makes the whole idea of light wind sailing so much more pleasurable. And even sometimes you can have that white knuckle ride in just like 10 knots of wind, depending on your point of sail and all that, which is a lot of fun.
Well, I think the thing that's kind of cool about being up in the Apostle Island area is that if you do establish sort of the destination sort of places, it's really going to behoove us to learn how to use the different sail inventory that we have, because we may need it to actually get to where we're going. You know what I mean? More efficiently, sort of thing. So I think once it's kind of like increasing your vocabulary, right? As a writer, like increasing your vocabulary as a sailor is learning how to utilize these different sails that you have, which is why in some ways, just kind of a little bit off track, but getting back to like how you have your setup with Mighty Sparrow, where you have Hank on still. Sometimes I wish for a setup like that, because I feel like even though I appreciate the flexibility and the convenience of a furling head sail, I sometimes feel that you kind of do give up a little bit of more options, if you will, with like what you have, like a whole varying, different head sails, shapes, certainly. Sizes.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then even like with the cutter rig, that's something else that I've been kind of thinking about too, is, when we were initially looking for a boat, we wanted to get a cutter rig because, again, it's like I read so much about how people talk about the versatility of a rig like that. And I even wanted to convert our boat to that. But the people at the marina that I talked to, they're like, no, you shouldn't. Yeah, just leave it. And I get it. It wasn't designed for that. But again, I guess what I'm trying to get back to is like, if you do have a destination in mind, it's just, I don't know. It's nice to have, I would think, to have all the different sails, because they're each meant for a certain thing, a certain type of sailing under certain conditions, certain directional or points of sail, like Ben was saying, but we don't really have that as great to an extent as with the furling head sail. But like you said, with the asymmetrical, I think once we get some confidence with that, I know that there's going to definitely be plenty of times where we'll need to use that, and I'll be glad to be versed in how to use it.
Oh, for sure. I mean, yeah, it'll literally be the difference between sailing or having to, fire up the engine to keep any sort of speed going. And, I guess that kind of brings up the next question. What did you think about, because this is the first boat that had the auxiliary diesel engine inboard, like a traditional sailboat. And, that experience of having that, I know before on some of the other boats that you've had, you'll have like an outboard to propel it, but it's kind of a different story to be able to fire that diesel up, isn't it?
Yeah.
I prefer an inboard diesel engine over the outboard. Our experience with the outboards on our 23-foot boat and our smaller boat that we've had, it's always a challenge to maneuver the boat, and some of the outboard engines, even the four strokes, are finicky, and you're worried it's going to stall, or at least one of our motors always did that when you're trying to come into the dock and it stalls on you, and you lose steerage right when you're trying to get into the slip, or something like that happens, or you power in too fast because you're at least trying to keep the engine from stalling. This boat with the inboard diesel is just so much easier, and you have the throttle. Is right there. You're not reaching over the stern of the boat to throttle the outboard, although you can step on the throttle on this boat.
Yes, we did. I think we all bumped it
because where it's not on
times.
That I guess is the downside of having it down there. But since it's a tiller boat, it doesn't have a, what do they call it? Pedestal.
Yeah, like I can see like where people they have the pedestal with the wheel, and then having it right at your hand right there. So then you're not at risk of.
But it's so much easier to put it into gear and out of gear, or just like forward idle and just control the boat so much easier than, in my experience with an outboard's always been problematic. It seems like, because you're either trying to steer with the rudder or with the motor, or depending on the situation, and
both of
This
them
was
sometimes. I mean, that's got to be pretty tricky to deal with basically two different steering wheels, if you will, or steering mechanisms, and then also the shifter being actually on the engine itself. That definitely, I can see how that gets a little tough.
Yeah, that's what they taught us we took a couple of the ASA courses. I mean, I always kind of tell people my knowledge of sailing is like Swiss cheese. It's like I've got some knowledge, but there's lots of holes. And there's, I always feel, and I'm sure Ben does too, that this is, a lifelong commitment to learning, which is what partly makes it fun and adventurous and interesting, right? Because you're constantly learning new things. But they did tell us that in this ASA basic keelboat. I remember, actually, no, it was the second class we took. The instructor we had, she wanted us to have a hand on the tiller and a hand on the tiller of the outboard engine. And so you're trying to do both. And it's a little bit like patting your head or whatever that, patting your head and rubbing your stomach thing. So coordination wise, it was I thought really challenging. But with this inboard, like I was not as that, I think for me, getting a larger boat was, I think, one of my biggest worries with the boat transitioning from outboard to inboard, because, I worry about like the shaft leaking. I worry about overheating. And we forgot to open up the freshwater intake the first time we started the engine. We're like, why do we see water coming out? Well, no, there's some antifreeze coming out. And,
we figured it out.
But still, it's just like, that could have been a disaster had we not been like, open up the freshwater intake.
Well, I thought they had done that when they launched the boat, but
yeah.
Anyways,
but anyway,
it just proves the point. You got to go through your checklist. So.
Yeah,
checklist. Exactly. And you can never trust the boatyard to actually take care of anything. And that's coming from somebody who worked at a boatyard. It's not so much that we don't want to, but we might not have it on our list of things to do or whatever. And so, like you said, Ben, the checklist is like, I don't know, it's just such a great thing to have on the boat, especially in the beginning, when you're trying to figure out the new systems and, you get a bit overwhelmed with, okay, which one's first and what do I do next? When you actually physically have that checklist, it's a godsend. It's great.
Yeah, it does kind of, I think for me at least, and I know you were saying some of your other clients like Mark and Steph, I think, with Montana.
They have the full on one laminated and everything ready to go.
Yeah, and it does. It just kind of makes you have like that, eliminates the thing of, oh my gosh, did I forget something? Because I do kind of, I think you get in the whole process of doing stuff that you could maybe inadvertently overlook something, especially when you're new to it. I think for me at least, I think that's going to be a really helpful tool to have the checklist.
It's easy to get distracted or
that's true.
Getting ready to get underway, or you may decide to leave quickly for some reason because of the wind conditions or something, but you didn't open up the seacock on the water intake. Like, you just got to run the check and then figure out, okay, what's our wind condition? What are we going to do to get out of here? Like we were practicing with you, Jerome. That was really helpful too. Like strategies for maneuvering in tight spaces in a marina. That was really helpful.
Yeah.
You were doing the 720 and all those tight space maneuverings was really helpful.
Oh yeah, that's a big one on my list because like I said, I've definitely sailed with a few people who the whole time they're out, you can tell, even though you're out sailing miles away from the marina, there's a little part of them that is always just thinking about what might happen when they pull the boat back into the dock. And it's like, we got to make sure that one is sort of nixed and we're feeling confident, or at least we have the steps we know we're going to take to make it the best possible docking with the least amount of chaos. And, if we get that down, I've always felt like that's a major focus point. And because it's also a stress point, and it's a point that causes a lot of worry and kind of anxiety because it's it's where the vast majority of damage happens when it comes to boats. It's in the marina on that windy day or with currents or with this and that. And, that's why it's definitely one of those things you want to practice as much as humanly possible when the conditions are good. And then you get that down, you move to the next level on a windier day, and you just keep going and going. I mean, nobody's got it perfect. Not anybody. I mean, I've seen seasoned skippers hit things and bounce off of stuff. So it inevitably is going to happen. But we just want to mitigate that as much as possible.
Well, it was kind of interesting because if you think back to the progression of events as of the 3 days unfolded, the third day really did kind of culminate in the most, the conditions to really kind of put some of the skills that we had been learning to the test, I guess, if you want to look at it that way. Like one of the things that sticks out in my mind is, so when we were coming back in from sailing, and I was at the helm, and Jerome, you and Ben were working on taking the sails, putting the sails, buttoning them up and whatnot. And I remember you were telling me to keep the stern. We had the stern facing, like going into the channel to get into the marina, and you kept telling me to like point towards that or head towards that. And so it was really good because with the way the wind was blowing, which I think we would have been kind of into the wind at that point, maybe. I'm trying to remember. But at any rate, I just remember thinking, this is a little challenging here for me, but because of the things we had done the 2 days before that, I felt like it wasn't like an insurmountable task, and I kind of understood the how I kind of felt like I had a better sense of to anticipate how the boat would behave and how much throttle I would need to give it. Like, do you remember how I kept putting the tiller way over too far? And you would say, now you're
flattening the rudder out. Right.
Yeah. And so just things like that, I think next time
you had no problem with the throttle. That was probably the best example of giving it everything it needed, because, when you're doing those pivot turns, it more often than not, people get very timid with the tiller, especially when or with the throttle, especially when you're in the marina in those tight quarters. Because when I made you do the pivot turns right there in the middle of the fairway, before the entrance where you're surrounded on all sides by cement walls and other boats, that's the time where if you're too gentle with things, that's when the wind takes over, and we're trying to basically best the wind, control the boat, and make the boat do exactly what we want it to, which I think you did like a 720, if I'm not mistaken, in that instance. Just kept going around and going around, and those are the little things that help you learn just how much power is needed, but then also, and probably more importantly, it gives you a little sense of control. Every single time you do it, you get more confident and you feel like, oh, okay, I can control this beast. It's not just going to start doing things that I don't want it to. And this is how I can, keep a cap on this thing. Because sometimes in the beginning, it does feel like you're like, well, it doesn't react the way I want it to, because it's not like a car, it's grounded in this fluid, and so it gets a little abstract, I think.
I kind of psych myself out a lot about it too, because most of my experience has either been as crew in the past, when I was growing up sailing, and then also just being at the helm and sailing itself. So sailing itself, I never feel like I lose control of the boat. Like I feel like I have a sense of what to do if something wonky happens. But for sure, like under power with the auxiliary, I always feel like, I'm having an you know what moments. It seems like in my mind, and that's to me what's the most challenging is, I guess, the way to spin it about boating is the engine stuff. I don't know why for me, but you never seem to have any worries about that sort of thing, really. So much.
Well, it's really no. I grew up on boats with little outboard motors on them, and just cruising around the bays of Delaware and Maryland and whatever. But so I guess I have some comfort, with that. But it's just learning how your boat responds with the engine that it has, and whatever steering tiller or wheel or outboard, if that's what it is. And once you learn, that's like what we were doing with Jerome. It's just like in the marina, or when you were coming in that one day outside of the marina entrances, how does the boat respond under these conditions, or just when we're in the marina.
Mm-hmm.
And you just, like when we first moved it off the seawall and to take it to the slip after it was launched, that's all I did the first 5 minutes. Just going around the marina was just like, how does it even go forward? You know, this is the first time I drove the boat. How does it even respond when I put it in gear? You know, it's like, let alone turning it and having wind blow it. And you just have to learn how the boat moves. And how, I think the one thing that we did learn was how it seems to me the boat's big, just big enough to have windage on it and get blown by the wind, but it's not a big boat, so it gets blown around easier than you would think. Like when we came into the dock and the stern, when the wind was off the dock and the stern got pushed out.
Yeah.
Well, and I think a lot of that was yeah. Well, and I think that is all the learning process. Like you're saying, you know, you don't know it in the beginning exactly how it's going to react. And I think it being a boat with such a small draft, it doesn't have that big keel that's pushing a lot of water. So, you know, as soon as that wind has it, it's not just a case of, oh, the bow is getting blown over. It's more a case of the entire boat is getting pushed sideways. And so you really have to react kind of differently. You know, Sparrow, obviously being full keel, you know, she doesn't have much of a turning radius. So I have to really rely on doing those pivot turns and being able to throw it in reverse. Whereas another boat that's more modern might have a fin keel that has a big bulb on the bottom and, you know, all that weight, and it'll pivot around itself in no problem at all. But it won't also get blown sideways, but the bow gets blown around. There's all sorts of different dynamics. And when we, you know, mess around with them, and hopefully we do it without crashing into anything, then, you know, we get to know our boat.
Well, I think another one of the top takeaways for us is the roving fender.
Yes, gotta have the roving fender. You don't want to try and use your arms or your legs or any of that sort of stuff. No, it's all about good fender placement.
Yeah, we used to always use a boat hook or the boat paddle, like if we were getting a little too close for comfort to another boat on approach or leaving, departure, whatever. But I think that fender thing, that makes a lot more sense.
Well, this boat's big enough. The smaller sailboats, you can.
Well, there were lighter
fend
weight.
off easier. But 25 and up, you're going to get crushed. Something's going to get crushed if you try and do it yourself.
That's definitely something else.
The boat is going to collapse. Right.
You get a greater appreciation. Like, you know, like I said, we went from a 17-foot to a 23-foot. And now this boat, I mean, it is 25 feet, which to some may not seem like a very big boat, but it's actually a pretty substantial 25-footer, I think. I mean,
oh my gosh, yeah.
I've been on some larger boats sailing, like I said, growing up and whatnot, but I do feel it's a heavier boat. And so, if you're coming in, like, I think when you came in the first time, when he was talking about the seawall, the marina, like, left after they splashed the boat, they left her on the seawall. So he had to take her from the other side of the marina back over to the slip. And so he did it independently. I decided just to meet him on the dock and catch him. And I remember when he was coming.
You left him to the wolves out there. Him. Wow.
He was on his own. But I went to catch him and catch the lines. And then, like, when I grabbed the bow of the boat, I'm like, holy, you know what? This is, I didn't, you know.
You're not going to stop the boat.
Yeah, I wasn't going to stop the boat.
Little boat. Yeah.
No, right.
So we had to do a little bit of quick maneuvering, or Ben had to, because the momentum, and he wasn't even going that fast, you know, really. But it is a significantly heavier
and that's
boat.
What Jerome was talking about. That was the other thing. The person at the helm, at the tiller, at the motor. What did you say is what did you call it? The last line, or what did you call that? Like, because that person could throw the boat in reverse, because that's what you need.
Yeah.
You're not going to stop it. you need somebody sometimes to actually put it in reverse if the wind's a certain way, or you came in a little too fast, or you can't get the spring line on for some reason. Somebody's got to be at the helm to put it in reverse or do whatever, and not to leave that spot to do something is a mistake.
Never
sometimes.
Leave that spot. The person on the helm, they're the ones that, and it's not just the fact that they become like the auxiliary line in a way, like they become a spring line by putting in reverse or forward, whatever needs to happen. But also they're the one that are, they're seeing the entire sort of picture play out. And so if the boat isn't doing what it should be, and it's like the bow is drifting away or something like that, that's when they can say, get that bow line on or get this on. But the minute that they leave the helm to go and grab like a stern line and do their own thing, now all of a sudden nobody's watching the entire thing play out. And if something is going wrong, it's like you're saying, it's all line work to be able to try and hold on to the thing. And sometimes these boats are just too heavy. And, even though, like you're saying, Chelle, it's only 25 feet, we're trying to really develop the skill set so that when you go to the 30-foot and then the 35-foot boat, all the same sort of skills are going to be involved so that you're building like the good habits going forward.
Yeah, totally. I think the other thing too is that, having the more we do it and in the different kinds of conditions that we'll have, it'll help me anticipate, like with you, like when I wasn't necessarily doing what I should be doing, and I'd be like, okay, what do I do? It's like,
that's what I'm there for.
You've been in so many different conditions that like, you can be like, okay, when the wind's blowing, this is blowing from that direction, from this, it's like, you kind of already have that, again, that sort of knowledge base, like, if you will, that I haven't really built that up yet, but I know I will. It's just that I think I have to give myself some grace and some space to be like, okay, I know I'm going to mess up, but let's just, when I do mess up, let's just try to do it in such a way that nobody gets hurt, and hopefully no boats get hurt too. But most importantly, that no person gets hurt, because I know I'm going to make mistakes, and I know that when I do make the mistakes, I don't want it to be such that it precludes me from maybe wanting to go, or that I will give up, sort of thing. Because I don't.
Yeah.
And that's why we wanted to work with you, because it's like, hey, this is the first time we're using this larger boat with all these different systems that our other boats haven't had. And like you were saying, to kind of help sort of reduce that learning curve, or to not make it feel, it's like kind of having support when you're trudging up the hill, learning all these new things. And you're kind of like right there, kind of helping us hold our hand, whatever you want to call it, but not really hand holding, because you were more, I feel like, watching and observing and guiding, not telling, but guiding, and then, asking us questions. Well, what if you did do it that way? What would probably happen? And making us really think about what it was that we were doing, rather than just being like, do this, do that. That sort of thing.
It's a fine line I have to walk out there for sure.
Yeah, I thought you were great doing that. Like, you let us sort of try and figure stuff out, or do something stupid, or not stupid, but like learn
a little bit of discovery mode. If I know that, if it's going to go wrong, but it's not going to be an issue, but it's going to be a good learning sort of experiment, then I'll let certain things go, and then we see, and then we figure out why. Because that's, I find, how people really ingrain those lessons in deep, because the worst thing an instructor can do is just demonstrate, and be like, all right, you got it. Because everybody's going to give you a thumbs up and be like, yeah, I got it. But they don't. And until you're actually doing it and also screwing it up, that's where, the big lessons get learned.
But I think it was also really good to, like, you have so much experience, like you could analyze the situation more rapidly than we could. Like when we had that difficult docking the last day. And I lost the line on the bow, or I lost the line on the bow. It came off, and
And I almost hit the boat
and
behind us.
the boat was getting blown to the boat next, and like we were able to back out. And you did the right thing, or you're just like, we're gonna go back out, go all the way back out, come all the way back. You're like, see you, Ben. We're gonna come back. We're going out and coming back in, because that was the right thing to do.
We took our time.
You just have to like reset and not try and
reset.
You can't try and fix something on the fly. You just have to say, okay, we're aborting this, and we got to start over. And
what do they call that? A mulligan or something? Like when you do it over?
Yeah.
Well, it's like
taking a mulligan.
Or takeoff.
That would be a good boat name, by the way.
Mulligan.
Mulligan, yeah, right. Mulligan. A good second boat name. Right. Well, and it was that, I mean, after we bailed on that one, we went and tied off for a while. We practiced a different one, but moreover, we took plenty of time. And that is a common mistake that you see sometimes, more in like a mooring field where somebody goes and tries to catch a mooring and they just miss it. And then they like power and do all this stuff to try and get right back to that ball, when the best thing is to just completely reset, go get a few boat lengths away, recalibrate everything, reset, and then come right back in and do it the right way, knowing, what happened or what caused the, miss of the mooring buoy. And so often people, I don't know what it is, but they just want to get back to it as soon as possible, and they never give themselves enough room to just go. And then they end up blowing the mooring like 2, 3, maybe 4 times. And then finally they'll go and do the big loop around, and it's like, okay, cool, we got it.
Well, if you remember too, when we did back out and just do it over, and then we saw there was another boat coming in, right? Another big sailboat that was coming in. So then it gave us an opportunity to practice some other things, like, okay, emergency tie up on the seawall, and I brought the boat up alongside. I did that. I never had done that before either. And I know it may not sound like a big deal, but you know what? These are all little things that are all part of doing what you're doing that you need to know how to do.
Was that because the boat was too big? You guys couldn't
well,
past it, or you just got
I think
out of
we were
its
just,
way,
I think in my mind, I was just like not wanting to add another layer of complication to the matter. Whereas like in evaluating the situation, it was like, okay, we could try to go out while they're coming in, but the seawall's right up there. Probably would make more sense. And I think, Jerome, it was your suggestion that we try it too. But why not just do that? Let them come in, and then we can figure out plan B, or, the next steps from there, sort of thing.
Yeah, the opportunity essentially just presented itself. I was like, well, if we got traffic, let's go ahead and we'll be able to just tie off. We can practice that, springing off with our stern line and all that sort of stuff. But also it gave us a chance to watch the other boat and see what they were doing, because they were having a lot of trouble as well, because they were in that same situation of being blown off of the finger pier and into the boat that's adjacent to their slip.
Yeah. I think that they actually did kind of touch the other boat on the port side, from what I remember too.
They had tons of fenders on that boat. That was one of the boats that had like 6 or 7 fenders on I think each side, which is great. I know most people won't do it, because fenders aren't cheap, but boy, if you can have a bunch of extra fenders and you got the space for them, I mean, there's nobody gives you an award for only using one fender, even though that's all you need.
Yeah, totally.
So when is the game plan? When are you guys heading back up there?
In July, not till middle of July.
Yeah.
When I get time off. Yeah, so kind of a long hiatus, but then after that, we're going up more frequently for the rest of the summer.
And into the fall. And then plus
into October,
we have the other boat still. We have our Compact 23 also still, that's at the little inland lake here. I mean, it's not super little. It's 11 miles long by a mile wide, and there's all sorts of coves and things. So, there's certainly opportunity for us to practice what we did, although it is an outboard, so it is a little going to be different. But still, that's its own set of skills too, right? With docking that boat with that sort of an auxiliary engine. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to getting back out and like I said, chasing the sweet spot again. Although we don't have brand new sails on this boat, but they're decent. But yeah, but mostly like I think I feel more confident about trying to practice the docking stuff because again, that for me, I don't worry about the sailing. I don't worry about the reefing. I don't worry about any of that stuff. That's my like I'm good, but when it comes to docking and the engine stuff, I'm like, uh-oh.
I think I said it when we were up there. I'm like, we could probably just spend like a half a day or more just docking.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, nobody wants to do that because they want to go out sailing.
Right.
But, and that's why people don't have experience docking because they're just like, I want to go out sailing. And like Jerome was saying, like some people, the docking at the end of the day could ruin the whole day for them. And that's so, you know, if we could have I mean, just go out and dock, just putt around the marina and then dock, like just keep doing it.
Well,
like you just have this practice like anything. It's just,
I got a little bit of I don't know. I didn't feel so badly about how I felt when I talked to one of the captains of the company that we went sailing with last year. We sailed with one of the captains on 3 different occasions, and she was this real nice young woman. And she's fully like, yeah, I mean, it took me probably a good, like, I don't know, 2 months before she said, and she's usually takes a Catalina 36 out. And she's like, yeah, it really probably took me a good 2 months of doing this before I started to feel like I kind of, because, you know, she's doing it like multiple times a day for days, day after day after day, you know? So even with all the practice that she was getting, I mean, it's
a bigger boat, but in certain conditions, like when we came in one time, she was definitely nervous.
Yeah.
About docking
so, I mean,
under those wind conditions.
It's certainly not something that other people people experience it just like I do. I know I don't know if it's the biggest thing for sailors to work with their engines, like, and have some level of intimidation about that or not. But it seems to me, I hear stories from all kinds of people who've been doing it for years that still, like you said earlier, you know, still will have times where it's like, yeah.
I think it's helpful, like what Jerome went through this, like what's your like plan B, or like, it's sort of like when people are flying, what little flying I've done with a pilot, they're always looking like where they can land or what's if this happens.
The exit strategy.
And like, if you know what, like, if you're in a marina or like, what is what's going to happen if the engine does cut out, where's the wind going to blow me?
Yeah.
Like if you can start thinking that way, not to be scared or freaked out by it, but just to understand your situation, like that's going to make you more comfortable.
Be prepared maybe a bit
and
more.
And like not panic about stuff. Like you got to be cool headed when things start to go sideways. Otherwise you're just not going to be prepared to deal with it and things will get worse potentially. So.
Well, and that, you know, that initial like nervousness that I think everybody feels, I know I do as I'm pulling in anywhere, you know, trying to have the right perspective on that. Cause in a way, you know, it's some little chemical that's being released into your body, you know, I don't know, adrenaline or whatever, but it's also helping to make you super energized, focused. And, you know, all of a sudden you got like this tunnel vision cause you're on edge. All your senses are a little heightened. And so, you know, instead of being like, oh, you know, I don't like this feeling, just own it and be like, all right, here we go. I'm pumping. Here we go. We're going to do this. And you just kind of take it all in. And I don't know. I think if you were 100% super casual and not nervous at all, that's when you can kind of go over the fence into being a bit complacent, and then things can go wrong because you're like, oh, I got this. This is no big deal. And then the next thing you know, you're getting pressed up against another boat because you weren't aware of some little aspect that, you know, if you're a bit nervous, you're a bit more cautious too.
Yeah, it's the anxiety, like a moderate amount of anxiety is helpful. Too much is not.
Too much
too
is
little
not,
is not good. You want to be in
we
the
don't want to
sweet
be
spot.
crippled by it. We want, exactly.
Or like what I always use, the force. Like you have the knowledge, you have the energy, you have the skill to do this, and you just have to trust in that and do it. and
trust in yourself.
That's what I mean. Yeah. And that's like the orthopedic surgeon I work with. Like, you got to set that fracture, use the force. Like, you can do it. Like,
yes.
Do it. Like, you have the power to do it. Like,
yeah.
But yeah, definitely.
Yeah, I think for sure. And, you know, again, like you're saying, Ben, it is one of those things where you get up there on your next trip, and if you get that no wind day, which I'm sure you probably will, or at least in the morning before the sea breeze kicks in or whatever, that's the time to just be like, you know what? Perfect opportunity. Let's take this and let's dock this boat like 15 times. Then we're going to be that much better, that much more confident. And then the wind picks up and you go out and you do your sailing. And yeah, I mean, it's not the most fun thing to do by any means, but at the same time, the sooner you get to that 100th docking, the better you're going to be. And if you keep putting it off, then it's just going to take longer to get to that comfort and confidence level. So I always try and look at it that way. It's like, well, what are you waiting for? Might as well just dive into this, and then we can get there where I want to be a whole lot sooner.
Yeah, I mean, I believe that some of your parting words of wisdom to us were practice, practice, practice.
Yes, yeah. Oh, always. Well, and that's going to be kind of, I think, the challenge going forward is that there's going to be a gap, and even though you still get to sail on another similar boat, it's getting back out on the bigger boat that's really going to be important. But you know, life is life, and we've got lots of things pulling us in different directions. So, you know, hopefully when you guys do get back up there, you have fine weather. Maybe it'll be a bit warmer, even though I know right now you're in a heat wave. I'm in a heat wave. It is so hot down here. I don't know if you can tell how shiny my forehead is. But, well, I was either that or, you know, I brought AC with me because I'm in North Carolina. I knew it was going to be warm. And, but the AC is super loud. It's just one of those window units. And although it's really nice to have on board, it's super loud. And I didn't want it to interfere with our audio podcasts here.
Oh, yeah. Wow. No, it's been brutal like the last few days and super, super windy, like I said. But, yeah, I don't like this kind of weather when it's really hot. I like the wind. The wind is cool, but I'm not the heat thing is not for me, which is why I like Lake Superior a lot too, because it's
right.
Cool.
You picked the right lake if you like that cool weather sort of thing. Yeah. I mean, even on the hottest day, if the wind's blowing off the lake, it's always going to be nice and cool up there.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, it's definitely. The weather's, I think it's hot up there now, but most of the time it's distinctly different than here in Iowa. It's usually 5 or 10 degrees cooler.
Yeah.
Just in general, let alone the lake, if you're out on the water.
Oh, I would think so. Yeah. Jeez Louise. I mean, and, you know, when we were up there, it was pretty much either overcast or smoky and hazy.
Yeah.
And so I never got to see kind of the real grandeur of being on that lake, but I can only assume when the sun is blaring and it's just beautiful crystalline waters, and from some of the videos around those Apostle Islands, it did look really amazing. I'm jealous that you guys are gonna be able to go mess around in their area.
Well,
it's beautiful.
I think we definitely would love, if you're willing, would love to have you come back for to do another session, and we can work on some of the things that I feel like I don't know how with the navionics. I mean, I guess I'll be able to kind of, YouTube it or whatever. But if, say we do want to plan a trip to Stockton, and then we watch our weather window and the wind and, just sort of the preparations that are involved, let's just call it I don't think it would be an overnight trip maybe to go to Stockton. But
depends on the wind.
Even so, it would be good to have, let's plan for let's do that. Let's plan for an overnight trip. Let's plan to go somewhere where we're going to have to anchor out. Let's plan
or keep sailing. Think about that.
Right.
You go sail up through the Apostles north of them, and then come around the backside, and you do it in I guess it would be like a 24-hour sail or something. We'd have to chart it out.
Yeah.
But that would, that's where, at noon or whatever, we'd have to start doing rotations and all that, because you got to be able to make it through the night and keep going.
And that'd
be a pretty big challenge.
Yeah, I'm thinking that would be something that it would be good for us to do, is that whole, like, what it's like to experience doing night watches and, some of those other sort of offshore type sailing experiences, if you will, because like when we just day sail, and we're not really destination sailing. It's fun. And then of course we have the challenges always of the docking stuff. Right. But to actually plan out a route, that would be, I think, something that's on my list of things to do. And, in my mind, again, I could think about, well, if I was going to drive from St. Louis to Los Angeles, here's what, but again, when you're doing it on a boat, there's so many other things that I'm sure I'm not going to think of. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, so it opens up a whole different dynamic. So what we're talking about now is like passage planning. And,
that's what I mean.
Beyond sort of the day sailing into more of coastal cruising and even beyond that. And so, you've got the planning and figuring out the trip, but then you've also obviously like with docking, you've got all sorts of different abort plans and different options, but you have your intended passage. Then you have to figure out provisioning, fuel, weather forecasting. Everything's just taken up to the next level. And the nice part about it when you do that is that because you're out there 24 hours a day, you're gaining a whole lot of knowledge. It's like a crash course because you're out there and you're doing it. Even though you go off watch and you sleep for a little while, you're still, you're going to sail. You're going to be in the cockpit and sailing the boat more hours than you would if you're doing like 3 or 4 days of daily, just going out in the morning, coming back in the afternoon. And so the learning curve is pretty steep. Like it'll get you to a point where you're like, okay, I'm feeling good. Get me off of this boat. I'm ready.
Well,
and
and the other thing that now that you've seen our boat and you kind of know how she's outfitted, it's like, I think that sort of plays into how the planning might go possibly. It is a small, like, I will tell you, I'm just going to be fully honest. I'm already looking at bigger boats. I love our boat. It is, I think she's a great boat, but to be fair, we were looking in originally for like a 30-foot to 34-foot boat.
Yeah.
But
we didn't find anything.
Yeah. Well, we did. We made an offer on that Toshiba 31, which I love, that Bob Perry design, but it didn't work out. But not to knock this boat, because she's, I think, a really nice little boat, right? She does allow some of those big boat sort of features to come into play and get some experience. But I could already see now that that was our third trip up this year, because we went in April to work on her. We went in May to work on her. And then the boat was splashed and we did some work. And then you came. We wanted to be ready for you. And now we did all this with you. And I can kind of start to see some of the things now that I couldn't, because I was like looking at the tree last fall and I didn't really see the forest. I fully sort of admit that a little. And so like even things like I know you said there's a ton of storage under the bunks and all that, which that's cool. But I'm like, I want to have like some, I want to be able to put some of my provisions in a place that's not like I'm like rooting through every, under the bunks.
Well, that's,
do you know what I mean?
Boats are always like that, though. I mean, it is tough. Even on Sparrow, the idea of if I want one thing, I have to move 10 things out of the way. It's just how it goes. And I don't think any boat size, because the bigger the boat, the more stuff you have to have on it.
Yeah, that's
it just kind of keeps getting bigger and bigger. But I think thinking of
within reason.
Yeah,
within reason.
Exactly.
I just kind of feel like there would be I don't know. It's hard to describe, but I don't know. I just already am kind of thinking down the line, like what sort of, based upon what's happened so far and what we've been working with, I can kind of think in my mind about, well, that might be nice to have that next time around, or if it was set up that way next time around. But
I think the boat is a great stepping stone, or like you were saying.
I was going to say that.
Big boat features, like we're learning all the skills that you need for bigger boats. If you went a big jump up, it could be potentially, too intimidating for some people, and then you won't want to like do anything. Like you'll just sit on it and sleep on it or whatever, and push yourself to sail it and learn to maneuver it and all the things we were doing.
Yeah.
Well, and one of the nice parts is that Chelle, I mean, I don't want to put you on the spot and say how many boats have you owned, but like you are experienced in the idea of like owning a boat and then selling a boat and then getting another one. And so it's not really out of your wheelhouse, but like you're saying, Ben, I think it really is. It's a great boat to learn this new set of skills where, you might bounce off a few things. You might do a little, I don't want to say damage, but like you're going to learn. And sometimes you're going to learn pretty hard lessons with this boat, which you may not want to learn with the next boat, so to speak, if that makes any sense, where, you can get away with a bit more on this one and then refine the skills so that when you do jump up to that dream boat of yours, that perfect size and all that, if there is such a thing, then you're going to be that much better prepared. So I guess what I mean by that is just, use this opportunity to grow and to gain that confidence for going forward and have fun. Have fun while you're doing it. That's the big thing.
Yeah, that's the most important thing.
It was also a good step for us too, because, we've had two other kinds of compact boats before. And so there was there is, I should say, a level of familiarity in some ways with how the boats are, just how they're designed and everything. So again, like for us to have gone from our compact 23 to the Toshiba 31, it would have been like, whoa. Even though I was so totally enamored by that boat, and totally could like envision being on that boat. It's I just think back to like, geez, the learning curve that we have now. But then, can you imagine if it was, on this
that
Toshiba 31?
More.
Yeah. So going from this 23 compact 23 to the compact 25 again, I really feel. I don't want to use the word logical because that's not really what we were thinking when we were looking for a boat. Like, oh, let's make the logical decision. Most of the time when you're buying boats, a lot of people are buying from the heart, like what feels right, and also what, you want to do out in the future sort of a thing too, of course. But it is, for me, it's always kind of, I will just be fully honest. It is a little bit of, it's a lot of an emotional thing for me. I feel a real strong emotional connection with the boats that we have. And so anyway, but yeah, I think you guys are absolutely right. And I need to not look a gift horse in the mouth for sure.
Well, it's what works for you now. Like you sure, you don't want to get something that's you can't grow into to some extent, but you don't need to get something that's overboard. Like it's like people have in our culture, people have like a baby, like a family has their first baby, and the baby's tiny little baby, and they go out and buy a 7-row SUV, thinking they need like, all this space for this little baby, when they're not going to need that probably ever, or maybe when the kids are older. But it's like you don't want to go overboard either and get something that's totally unnecessary and more expensive to maintain. Bigger boats cost more money for everything, to put it in the slip and all that. So
maintaining them.
This boat is sort of like
it's a good middle ground, I think.
Yeah, it's like it works for what we're doing, and we also didn't know and still don't know how often we can get up there because it's an 8-hour trip, and I only get so much time off, so we didn't want to buy a boat that's going to be more costly and we don't have the time to put into its maintenance or whatever.
Just to enjoy it.
Well, that too. I'm just saying, bigger boats can be more work and more expense for sure, more expense. So we're in a trial period. Is this going to work for us going up there? The litmus test. Or, or not.
Well,
we're going to be able to get up there where we feel like it's worth it.
You don't want to jump in too soon, so that's definitely a good thing to think of.
Don't you think a lot of people that you see online though that are doing the sailing thing, a lot of them do just dive right in, like, like not really any
for the
experience.
first boat, yeah. And I think a lot of that is, I don't want to say ignorance, but basically people will buy their first boat and they'll buy what they can or what comes along, or there's a myriad of different reasons. But moreover, if they haven't ever been on a boat before, or their sailing experience is very small and it's their first boat, they just kind of jump in not knowing exactly what the pitfalls, what the pros and what the cons are. And, like you said, Chelle, sometimes you're buying with emotion, because, I mean, it feels like sometimes boats speak to us when we're looking at them. And, it's real hard to overcome that with common sense and budgeting and all this future thought, when you're just like, boy, that boat is beautiful. And boy, it'd be fun to, take the helm of that. So I don't know. I mean, I think you're in a really good spot now, and it'll be a great boat for training and going out and doing some adventures and stuff. And on that note, I would say, like, I will happily come back up there and do, even go for the big one. But there's a caveat. You have to get out there and do your own adventures first, so that when we go to do like an overnight sail and stuff like that, it's not, we're not just jumping into the next thing. You guys have gained a bunch of experience on your end, so that, we're moving forward. Some of the people I've worked with in the past, they go and do a bunch of passages and small hops, and then, cruising through the Bahamas and stuff. And then once they've done that, that's when we'll level up and do like the offshore trip and stuff. And that seems to work out pretty well, because it kind of gives you a little extra kick in the butt, if you will, to get out there and kind of push the envelope, so to speak.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, we had to get past the end of Long Island because we couldn't do that this time.
That was the wind's fault.
It
not
just
easy.
Would not give up. Let us get past there.
We were like,
we were right there. All right, guys. Well, we're well past an hour now, and I got to turn that AC back on before I overheat. But thank you so much for not only coming on the show and inviting me on your show, Chelle, but also for having me up there, and the dinners and the great sailing. That was a lot of fun, and it was great to get to know you guys even better.
Yeah, and our deepest thanks to you, and it's just been amazing to work with you. And we can't wait for the next time around, and just all the gratitude we feel. I know it's just, thank you so much for all you did for us.
Yeah, it was a good time. Thanks for being who you are.
My pleasure.
Thanks for having us on the show to share our experiences too. I really appreciate that.
Yeah.
My pleasure, for sure. All right, guys. Well, I look forward to hearing about your adventures, and we'll talk again.
Yeah.